Zixera pressed her crystalline hands against the transport pod's window, watching Earth's spaceport grow larger as they descended. Her transparent body reflected rainbow patterns across the pod's interior, a trait common to all Meridians. She had spent the entire journey wondering how she would survive a year among the soft, fleshy creatures called humans. "Remember, daughter," her mother had warned, "humans are a primitive species. Their bodies are mostly water. Be careful not to break them." The pod landed with a gentle thud. Zixera gathered her belongings, making sure her protective covers were secure. The last thing she needed was to chip her outer layer on her first day at Earth's International Species University. As she stepped into the arrival hall, a loud voice startled her. "Welcome, new students." A human female was waving her arms enthusiastically. Zixera winced, expecting the human's rapid movements to cause serious damage to her water-filled limbs. "I'm Sarah Williams, your student guide." The human bounced over to Zixera. "You must be my new roommate." Zixera took 3 careful steps backward. "Greetings. Please maintain safe distance. I do not wish to cause structural damage to your form." Sarah laughed, a sound like tinkling crystals. "Oh, you're one of those crystalline beings, right? Don't worry about me. I'm tougher than I look." As if to prove her point, Sarah accidentally bumped into a metal bench. Zixera's internal lattice nearly shattered from shock, but Sarah just rubbed her hip and smiled. "Oops, I'm such a klutz sometimes." During the campus tour, Zixera's horror only grew. Humans were everywhere, bumping into each other, slapping each other's backs, and worst of all, participating in something called hugging, which involved pressing their bodies together. Yet none of them broke or even cracked. In their shared room, Sarah flopped onto her bed, actually threw herself onto it, and bounced slightly. Zixera recorded a quick message on her personal communicator. "Day 1 on Earth. Humans appear to have unknown protection mechanism. Witnessed multiple impacts. No signs of damage. Further study needed." So, Sarah sat up. "Want to grab dinner? The cafeteria makes amazing burgers. You wish to consume sustenance with me?" Zixera asked carefully. "But how will you avoid injury while eating?" Sarah's forehead wrinkled. "Injury from eating? Oh, you think we're fragile because we're soft, don't you? Your species is 60% water. This is scientific fact." "Well, yeah, but that's what makes us flexible." Sarah stood up and did a quick twirl. "See, we bend, we don't break." Zixera's scientific curiosity overcame her fear. "Fascinating. Your species has evolved fluid dynamics as a defense mechanism. I guess you could say that." Sarah grinned. "Come on, I'll show you how humans eat. Promise I won't break." As they walked to the cafeteria, Zixera observed other humans. They jumped, ran, and moved with reckless abandon. Her data crystals were already filling with observations. Perhaps these humans weren't as primitive as Meridians thought. Any species that could impact solid objects repeatedly without structural failure must have some advanced biological engineering. She quickly sent another message home. "Update. Humans appear to possess extraordinary impact resistance. Request permission to conduct detailed study. Also about to observe human feeding habits. If you don't hear from me tomorrow, assume their durability does not extend to their digestive systems." Sarah called out from ahead. "Hurry up, Rumi. The good curly fries will be gone." Zixera carefully increased her walking speed. This year was going to be far more interesting than she had expected. The physical education class made Zixera question everything she knew about biology. As she stood in the gymnasium, her crystalline form glinting under the bright lights, she watched in horror as 20 humans chased a single orange ball. "They call this basketball," she recorded in her data crystal. "Humans deliberately collide while pursuing a rubber sphere. Most fascinating. They appear to enjoy it." "Zixera," Coach Martinez called out. "Your turn to try." She took 3 careful steps backward. I must decline. My species is not designed for high-velocity impacts. Sarah, sweaty and grinning from the game, jogged over. Come on, Rumi. You just need to catch and throw. No one's going to tackle you. This isn't football. There's a sport involving feet and balls. Sarah's voice rose in panic. Before Sarah could explain, another human crashed into her while chasing the ball. Sarah's internal lattice vibrated with fear, but Sarah just laughed and helped the other student up. Neither showed signs of damage. During the water break, Sarah overheard something that changed everything. Man, I'm gonna feel that fall tomorrow. The student who had crashed said, probably get a bruise. Just drink milk, Sarah replied. Good for your bones. Sarah's scientific sensors went into overdrive. Bones. She approached them carefully. You have internal support structures. Well, yeah, Sarah said. How did you think we stayed upright? The revelation sent Sarah into a research frenzy. That evening, she accessed the university's xenobiology database, studying human skeletal systems until her crystals hummed with excitement. Emergency update to Meridian Science Academy, she recorded. Humans possess internal crystalline calcium matrices, not primitive water bags at all. They are mobile crystal gardens. The next day, she returned to PE class with new purpose. She positioned herself near the court, scanning every movement with her sensory crystals. Each jump, fall, and collision provided new data about human durability. Remarkable, she muttered, watching Sarah bounce back up after diving for the ball. Their crystal structures can repair microfractures. They don't just survive impacts, they grow stronger from them. Coach Martinez noticed her interest. Ready to join in, Sarah. This time, she stepped forward. I wish to attempt a throw. For science. The gym fell quiet. Sarah handed her the ball, demonstrating the proper grip. Sarah analyzed the trajectory calculations, adjusted for Earth's gravity, and released the ball. It sailed in a perfect arc, right into the face of a tall human student named James. Oh no! Sarah's crystals paled. I've damaged him. Quick, call the structural repair team. But James just rubbed his nose, laughing. Nice arm. But usually, we aim for the hoop. Sarah spent the rest of the class documenting this incredible discovery. Her latest report to home read, humans don't just have bones, they have a complete shock absorption system. Their outer layer absorbs impacts, protecting the internal crystal matrix. And their repair capabilities are beyond anything in our medical science. That evening, Sarah found her roommate surrounded by holographic anatomy diagrams. Still studying bones? Sarah asked. Your species is extraordinary, Sarah replied. We thought you were primitive because you're soft, but your softness is what makes you strong. It's beautiful engineering. Sarah smiled. Thanks. Want to come watch the wrestling team practice tomorrow? Sarah's crystals turned pale again. She wasn't quite ready for that level of human durability yet. Sarah had a problem. Every time James walked into the cafeteria, her crystal matrix vibrated at an unusual frequency. Sarah called it having a crush, but Sarah was certain it was just scientific interest in his particularly well-structured bone system. You should talk to him, Sarah suggested during lunch. He keeps looking at you. Impossible, Sarah replied, her form shifting to a slight pink shade. He is studying my crystalline biology, just as I study human durability. Sarah rolled her eyes. Sure, that's totally why he asked me if you're single. Sarah's entire body turned rose-colored. He inquired about my relationship status. But how would such a pairing even function? I could accidentally shatter him. Trust me, humans aren't that fragile. Sarah waved James over to their table. Sarah's crystals chimed in panic. James sat down, his athlete's grace making Sarah's sensors buzz. Hey, he said, smiling. I've been reading your paper on human bone structure. It's fascinating. You read my research. Zixera's voice resonated with surprise. Yeah, I'm a sports medicine major. Your insights about microfracture healing could revolutionize our training methods. As they talked, Zixera forgot her fear of human fragility. James understood biology in a way that made her scientific crystal pulse with excitement. He explained how human bones grew stronger through careful stress, a concept that contradicted everything she knew about crystal maintenance. Would you like to get coffee sometime? James asked. We could discuss your theories about human adaptation. Zixera's structure vibrated so intensely that nearby cups rattled. Yes, that would be acceptable for research purposes. Later that week, at the university coffee shop, Zixera learned that humans had another surprising feature. They could turn red without changing their entire molecular structure like she did. So, James said, after explaining the mechanics of muscle memory, I was wondering if you'd like to go to the spring dance next week. Zixera nearly dropped her data crystal. Dance. But the impact risks. I promise to be careful, he smiled. Plus, I'd love to learn about meridian movement patterns. That evening, Zixera sent a frantic message home. Critical update. Human courtship rituals involve synchronized movement exercises. Request immediate cultural guidance. Also, their faces change color like we do. Previous theories about human emotional displays require complete revision. Sarah found her later, practicing human dance moves alone in their room. Need help? She offered. How do humans maintain structural integrity while performing these movements? Zixera demonstrated a basic step, her crystalline feet clinking against the floor. We're flexible, remember. Here, try it more fluid, less rigid. After an hour of practice, Zixera made a breakthrough. By adjusting her crystal lattice to a more flowing pattern, she could move almost as smoothly as a human. See? Sarah grinned. You're getting it. Perhaps, Zixera recorded that night, the key to understanding humans isn't just studying their hardness, but learning from their adaptability. They flow like water yet stay strong like crystal, and somehow, they've made me want to do the same. She paused, then added, personal note. James's bone structure is aesthetically pleasing. This is purely scientific observation. From her bed, Sarah called out, You're humming again. You only do that when you're thinking about him. Zixera's crystals turned pink once more. Perhaps some human influences didn't need scientific explanation after all. The accident happened during advanced xenobiology lab. Zixera and Sarah were studying cellular samples when the ancient storage unit above their workspace gave way. Zixera's sensors detected the falling metal cabinet first. Her crystalline structure froze in terror. Not for herself, as her crystal body could withstand the impact, but for Sarah. Time seemed to slow as her human friend looked up. What happened next would change Zixera's understanding of humans forever. Sarah didn't freeze. She didn't panic. Instead, she moved with startling speed, pushing Zixera out of the way and raising her own arms to shield them both. The cabinet crashed down, striking Sarah's shoulders and back. Sarah. Zixera's voice resonated with fear. Emergency protocols. Call medical reconstruction. How many bones are shattered? Can you? Ow. Sarah interrupted, wincing as she pushed the cabinet aside. That's gonna leave a bruise. Zixera's crystals paled to nearly white. A bruise? A bruise. The impact force was sufficient to crack my outer layer, and you're worried about surface discoloration. The lab professor rushed over, checking Sarah for injuries. Besides some impressive bruising and minor scratches, she was fine. They insisted she visit the medical center anyway, and Zixera hovered anxiously beside her friend the entire way. I don't understand, Zixera said as they waited for the doctor. You deliberately placed yourself in danger. Your soft exterior should have provided minimal protection against metal. Sarah smiled, though she was still wincing. That's what friends do. Besides, humans are pretty good at taking hits. We're kind of built for it. The doctor's scan revealed what Six-Era had feared, microfractures in Sarah's shoulder blade. But instead of showing concern, both Sarah and the doctor seemed pleased. "Good news," the doctor said. "The fractures are minor. Your bones will actually heal stronger than before. Just ice it and take it easy for a few days." Six-Era's scientific sensors went into overdrive. "You mean you're not just damage-resistant, you actually improve from damage?" "Within reason," Sarah laughed. "We can't go around breaking bones for fun. But yeah, that's basically how human bodies work. We adapt." That evening, Six-Era sent her most important update yet to the Meridian Science Academy. Urgent revelation. Human durability extends beyond mere physical resilience. They possess rapid adaptation capabilities, regenerative healing, and most remarkably, they willingly risk structural damage to protect others. Previous assumptions about their primitive nature were completely wrong. James stopped by their room with ice packs and chocolate, explaining that both were traditional human healing aids. Six-Era watched in fascination as Sarah happily consumed the brown squares, while chatting about the accident as if it were a minor inconvenience. "You're thinking too hard again." Sarah noticed Six-Era's intense stare. "I can hear your crystals humming." "I believe humans were fragile," Six-Era said softly, "that we needed to protect you. But you protected me, knowing you would be injured." "Of course I did. You're my friend. But your body is so soft." "Maybe that's our strength," Sarah suggested. "We're soft enough to absorb impacts, tough enough to survive them, and smart enough to use them to get stronger." Six-Era's crystals glowed with understanding. She had come to Earth thinking she would study primitive beings. Instead, she was learning that sometimes the greatest strength came in forms she had never imagined. She reached out and, for the first time, initiated a human hug with Sarah. Very gently, of course. She was still working on calibrating the proper force for human interactions. "No way!" Sarah gasped as Six-Era's body emitted a complex pattern of rainbow lights, filling their dorm room with dancing colors. "You're telling me all Meridians can do this?" "Crystal song is our traditional art form," Six-Era explained, her lights pulsing in rhythm. "We use our internal lattices to create resonance patterns. Each family has their own unique frequency." James leaned forward in fascination. "It's like a light show and music combined." Six-Era had finally decided to share her culture with her human friends. After the accident in the lab, she realized she'd spent so much time studying humans that she'd forgotten to let them study her too. "Would you like to try singing with me?" she asked. "Human vocal cords create fascinating vibrations." Sarah and James looked at each other, grinning. "Only if you try dancing with us after," Sarah countered. To Six-Era's surprise, human voices could match crystal frequencies remarkably well. As Sarah sang a high note, Six-Era's body hummed in harmony, creating patterns she never made before. James joined in with a lower tone, and suddenly they were creating an entirely new form of crystal song. "This is amazing." Sarah clapped when they finished. "We have to show this at the cultural festival next month." Six-Era's crystals shifted to a nervous pale blue. "But that would involve dancing too. I'm still not confident about rapid human movements." "Trust me," James said softly, holding out his hand. "We'll teach you." Over the next hour, Six-Era learned that human dance wasn't just about movement, it was about trust. James guided her gently, showing her how to sway without fear of damaging him. Sarah demonstrated how to let her crystalline form flow more naturally. "See," Sarah said, "you don't have to be soft to be flexible." Six-Era recorded a new observation that night. Extraordinary discovery. Humans can adapt their movements to accommodate different species' limitations, just as they adapt to physical challenges. They don't just survive. They find ways to include others in their adaptability. The practice sessions became daily events. Six-Era taught them more about crystal song, while they helped her understand the joy of movement. She learned that her crystal structure could bend and flow in ways she never imagined possible. One evening, while taking a break, Sarah asked, "Don't you get tired of recording everything we do?" "I'm a scientist," Zixera replied. "Everything about humans is worth studying. Even this." James spun her carefully, making her crystals chime with laughter. "Especially this," she admitted. "My people believed humans were primitive because you're soft. But you taught me that softness allows for things we never imagined. You bend, you adapt, you include others in your flexibility." Sarah grinned. "And you taught us that being crystal doesn't mean you have to be rigid." That night, Zixera sent an unusual message home. Personal log. "Today I learned that strength isn't about hardness or softness. It's about finding ways to move together without breaking each other. Humans mastered this art long ago. Perhaps it's time we learned from them." She looked at her reflection, noticing how her crystal structure had subtly changed over the months. She still sparkled, but now she could flow too, a bit more like her human friends. Also, she added to her log, "I may have discovered why humans enjoy this thing called dancing so much. Further research is definitely required." From across the room, Sarah called out, "Less logging, more practicing. We've got a cultural festival to prepare for." Zixera's crystals glowed warm gold with happiness. For once, she thought, the research could wait. The day of the cultural festival arrived, and Zixera's crystals were vibrating with nervousness. The university's main hall was packed with students from 50 different species, all waiting to see the performances. "What if I move too quickly and hurt someone?" she whispered to Sarah backstage. "What if my crystal song is too intense for human ears?" "Hey," Sarah squeezed her hand gently, a gesture they'd perfected over months of practice. "We've got this. Just remember what we practiced." James adjusted his light reactive costume, designed to shimmer with Zixera's crystal song, ready to show everyone what happens when humans and Meridians work together. The announcer called their names, and Zixera's crystals paled. But as they walked onto the stage, she remembered how far she'd come from that frightened Meridian who thought humans would break at the slightest touch. Their performance began with darkness. Then, Zixera's crystal song filled the hall, her body emanating waves of blue and gold light. The audience gasped as Sarah's voice joined in, matching the crystal frequencies perfectly. James began the dance, his movements flowing like water despite his solid human frame. As they'd practiced, Zixera let her crystal structure relax, moving in ways that would have horrified her teachers back home. She swayed with James, her lights painting patterns in the air, while Sarah's voice wove through the crystal song. The moment of truth came at the climax. James lifted Zixera, something that had taken weeks to perfect. She pushed past her fear, trusting in human strength as he spun her through the air. Her crystal song burst into a rainbow of colors, filling the hall with light and sound. Sarah's voice soared, and Zixera felt something she'd never experienced before. Perfect harmony between crystal and flesh, between rigid and soft, between her world and theirs. As James set her down, they moved together in the final sequence. Zixera's lights pulsed with their heartbeats, and Sarah's voice carried the crystal song to its peak. They ended with all three of them connected, hands linked, voices and lights united. The silence lasted one breath. Then the hall erupted in applause. Species that normally couldn't communicate with each other were cheering together. Zixera saw several crystalline beings like herself staring in amazement at what she'd done with her human partners. That was incredible. Sarah hugged her backstage, and this time Zixera didn't worry about fragility at all. "Did you see their faces?" James grinned. "I think you just revolutionized interspecies performance art." Zixera's crystals glowed with joy as she reached for her data crystal. But for once, she hesitated. Some things she was learning didn't need to be recorded and analyzed. Some things just needed to be felt. Later that night, as they celebrated their first-place win in Sarah and Zixera's room, she did make one final note. Today I learned that humans aren't just surprisingly strong. They help others find strength too. They taught me that being soft doesn't mean being weak, and being crystal doesn't mean being unchangeable. Sarah peeked over her shoulder, still making observations about humans. No, Zixera smiled, her crystals twinkling. This time, I'm making observations about friends. James raised his cup, to breaking expectations, and to being soft and strong. Sarah added. Zixera's crystals chimed with laughter as she joined the toast. She'd come to Earth expecting to study primitive beings. Instead, she'd learned that true strength came in many forms, and sometimes the softest ones were the strongest of all. To humans, she said warmly, who taught a crystal being how to bend without breaking. The end of the academic year came faster than Zixera expected. As she packed her data crystals, each one filled with a year's worth of observations about humans, she couldn't help but laugh at her first entries. Initial observation. Humans are primitive water-based life forms. Handle with extreme caution. Warning. They appear to enjoy colliding with each other. Sarah looked up from helping her pack. Reading your old notes again. Yes. Listen to this one. Humans consume solid food without structural damage. Most puzzling. Requires further study. Zixera's crystals chimed with amusement. I was so wrong about everything. Not everything, James said from the doorway. We are mostly water. He walked in carrying drinks for their last night together. Zixera stood straighter, her crystal form glowing with purpose. That's why I've made my decision. I'm staying. What? Sarah dropped the box she was holding. I've accepted a teaching position here at the university, Zixera explained. The science department wants me to lead a new course. Adaptive biology. Learning from human resilience. Her friends stared at her in surprise, then Sarah launched herself forward for a hug. A year ago, such an impact would have terrified Zixera. Now she caught her friend easily, her crystals singing with joy. But what about the Meridian Science Academy? James asked. I thought they wanted you back as a researcher. Zixera's colors shifted to a determined blue. I sent them my final report this morning. Would you like to hear it? She picked up her last data crystal and played the message. Final conclusion. We were wrong about humans. Their soft biology isn't primitive. It's revolutionary. They don't just survive. They adapt. They don't just exist. They grow stronger from challenges. And most importantly, they don't just live. They help others live better too. She paused the playback, her crystals glowing softly. There's more, but that's the important part. The academy can study my research, but I need to stay here. There's still so much to learn. Like what? Sarah asked, grinning. Like how humans can turn any situation into a reason to celebrate, Zixera said, noticing the cake James was trying to hide behind his back. Surprise. Her friends pulled out a small party banner. Congratulations on becoming Professor Zixera. As they celebrated, Zixera made one final recording. Personal log. A year ago, I thought I was coming to study primitive beings. Instead, I found teachers. Humans taught me that strength isn't about being hard or soft. It's about knowing when to be each. They showed me that adapting doesn't mean weakening, and that some things can't be learned through observation alone. She looked at her friends, now arguing playfully about who would get the biggest piece of cake. They taught me that sometimes you have to let go of old beliefs to discover new truths. And most importantly, they taught me that the best research doesn't just fill data crystals. It changes the researcher too. Sarah called out, less recording, more celebrating, Professor. Zixera's crystals glowed with all the colors of joy as she joined them. She had one more message to send home. Update to previous warning. Humans are not primitive. They are not fragile. They are not simple. They are extraordinary, and I have much more to learn from them. As she sat between her best friends, eating cake, another human custom she'd grown to love, Zixera realized something. She wasn't just staying to study humans anymore. She was staying because sometimes the softest species could build the strongest bonds. And that was worth all the data crystals in the galaxy.